Christopher A. Cooper, professor of political science and public affairs, Western Carolina University, wrote earlier this week about how Lindsey Graham kept his seat for 30 years by sensing where South Carolina's Republican base was heading and beating them there. It's a study in political survival as a form of constant, restless motion. Then there's a piece from yesterday by Sally Jenkins about Lionel Messi, who dominates soccer at 39 by doing something unexpected. He walks. While younger players sprint, Messi turns his head, scanning for a gap that hasn't formed yet. What's striking is how staying at the top, whether in the Senate or a stadium, seems to require the same invisible habit of spotting a shift before it actually happens. Writing last week, Christopher A. Cooper, professor of political science and public affairs, Western Carolina University, looks past the headlines about Donald Trump to find a 30-year pattern. Notice the way Graham entered South Carolina politics in 1992, winning 60% of the vote when Republicans were still an underdog minority. It shows a politician who didn't just follow the base, but sensed where it was moving, years before it arrived.
Since South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham's death on June 11, 2026, much of the commentary has focused on his evolution from Donald Trump critic to Trump ally. But focusing on that transformation misses the broader pattern that defined his political career. For more than 3 decades, Graham repeatedly positioned himself where Republican politics in the South were headed rather than where they had been. As scholars of elections and Southern politics, we believe that instinct helps explain not only his embrace of Trump, but also nearly every major political decision he made. That includes everything from running as a Republican in South Carolina when Republicans were still an ascendant minority in the state, to joining the Republican Revolution when Republicans took control of both houses of Congress in the 1994 midterms, to adapting to the Tea Party era when insurgent Republicans rode a wave to an abrupt electoral shift, and ultimately becoming one of Trump's closest allies. Reading the political tea leaves. One of Graham's early bets was that South Carolina's political future belonged to the Republican Party. Although Republicans remained a minority in the early 1990s, demographic change, evangelical mobilization, and suburban realignment were steadily improving their prospects. In 1992, Graham challenged South Carolina Representative Lowell Ross, a Democrat, for the 2nd district seat in the state's legislature. Graham won 60% of the vote and became one of the first Republicans to represent upstate South Carolina since Reconstruction. Republicans gained control of the South Carolina House during the next cycle, in 1994, and took control of the South Carolina Senate in 2000.
While many ambitious South Carolina politicians remained in the Democratic Party through the early 1990s, Graham understood that the state's political future belonged to Republicans. The Republican Revolution. Just as he had anticipated the changing political landscape in South Carolina, Graham's entry into national politics displayed a keen ability to read the political moment. He ran for an open seat in the U.S. House of Representatives after Democrat Butler Derrick, a 20-year incumbent, announced his retirement. Graham recognized that South Carolina's 3rd district had become part of a broader Southern realignment that was increasingly favoring Republican congressional candidates. In addition to these trends, there was a growing backlash against healthcare reform and other policies championed by Democratic President Bill Clinton. Graham joined a group of Republican candidates who united behind the Contract with America, a series of promises, tax cuts, welfare reform, a balanced budget, from the Republican leadership to the American people. The resulting GOP surge concluded with a takeover in the House for the first time in 40 years. Graham and his newly elected colleagues helped propel Newt Gingrich to the House speakership. Graham entered Congress just as the Republican Party was transforming itself from a congressional minority into a governing majority. Adapting to a changing GOP. Graham again showed his knack for political timing when he decided to run for the open seat vacated by longtime Senator Strom Thurmond in 2002. Though midterm contests had historically been difficult for candidates from the president's party, President George W. Bush was riding record approval ratings following the September 11th terrorist attacks.
Graham had amassed a political war chest during his time in Washington and did not face a primary challenger in 2002. His general election opponent was Alex Sanders, the former chief judge of the South Carolina Court of Appeals and president of the College of Charleston. Graham won handily by a 54% to 44% margin. Graham's Senate career also displayed his political acumen and ability to respond to changes within the Republican electorate. During the pre-Trump era, Graham frequently reached across the aisle, most famously as one of the Three Amigos, a term for the hawkish national security views of Sens Graham, Joe Lieberman, a Democrat, and Republican John McCain, that riffed off a popular movie by the same name starring Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Chevy Chase. He also worked on other high-profile bipartisan legislation, including a climate change measure in 2009 with Democratic Senators John Kerry and Lieberman, and he supported some judicial nominees from Democratic presidents. These bipartisan efforts reflected a Republican Party that still rewarded cross-party cooperation on national security, judicial appointments, and some major policy issues. This was also an era when McCain-style conservatism, marked by a softer rhetorical style and less ideological fervor, still held considerable influence among Republicans. South Carolina's increasing conservatism. Even before Trump arrived, Graham had already shown an ability to read the political moment by adapting after the Tea Party movement, focusing on lower taxes and a smaller government reshaped Republican incentives. During this era, Graham's rhetoric became increasingly conservative. He emphasized immigration enforcement and became more combative with Democrats.
Graham's role in the 2013 bipartisan Gang of Eight immigration reform efforts is a good example. He initially advocated a pathway to citizenship as part of comprehensive reform. But after the effort collapsed and immigration became a defining issue in Republican politics, he increasingly emphasized border security and criticized Democratic approaches to immigration. Graham recognized that compromise had become a political liability among Republican primary voters. Political scientist Sean Theriot labeled Graham one of the Gingrich senators, a group that fundamentally altered norms in the Senate, driving it toward more obstructionist and conservative policies. The culmination of a pattern. Graham's decision to ally himself with Trump, therefore, represented less of a sudden reversal than the culmination of a pattern that had defined his career. By 2016, Republican primary voters had largely embraced Trump, and Graham recognized that reality more quickly than many Republicans. When asked about his increasing conservatism, Graham acknowledged the change in political math that had altered South Carolina politics and reordered his incentives. Most of us have one thing to worry about, and that's the primary. Most of us are not in swing states, Graham said. Whether viewed as principled adaptation or political opportunism, Graham repeatedly aligned himself toward the direction South Carolina, Southern, and Republican politics were moving. That instinct, not simply his alliance with Trump, helps explain how he remained politically relevant for more than 3 decades, while many contemporaries faded from the scene.
As the Gingrich senators age out of office and are replaced by newer senators who have experienced political life only in the Trump era, Graham may come to be seen as one of the last Republicans whose career spanned 2 distinct political worlds.
Christopher A. Cooper leaves a picture of a man who never stays in one place long enough to be pinned down. Graham's 30-year run looks less like a series of contradictions and more like a talent for predicting the weather. He wasn't just following the crowd, he was spotting storms before they even formed. It suggests that survival in a high-stakes environment depends on a total lack of friction with the surrounding world. But then notice the shift in Sally Jenkins' description of Lionel Messi. On the surface, the soccer pitch and the Senate floor have nothing in common, but the underlying mechanic is the same. Messi spends most of a match just walking, his head swiveling, hunting for the one thing Graham was also chasing, an opening. The interesting thing is the direction of the movement. Where Graham survived by merging with the new majority, Messi survives by finding the thickets of legs and moving away from them. He stays relevant at 39 by being out of the game until the exact second he needs to be in it. Read alongside Cooper, Jenkins shows that the most effective way to dominate isn't by being the loudest or the fastest, but by being the person who sees the empty space before anyone else realizes it's there.
What Lionel Messi sees, the World Cup's all-time leading goal scorer, is always paying attention. Lionel Messi on the soccer field takes the short, trotty steps of a dachshund in the park. Such diminutive, mincy movements are part of his mystique. He gives opponents absolutely no reason whatsoever to track his runty 5'7" figure right up until he bolts away and suddenly tears open the grass in front of him. He becomes the most commanding man on the green expanse and seems to grow a foot in stature as he charges the goal. Perhaps Messi's greatest gift is this ability to control his opponent's attention, to deflect and attract it at will. To appreciate Argentina's captain in Sunday's match against Spain, perhaps his last World Cup appearance, watch him without the ball. This allows for the eye to fully measure his exploitative changes of speed and the dodgy shifts in direction that have made him the World Cup's all-time leading goal scorer. Such close reading also reveals just how much he is the center and dictator of his team's action, even when he doesn't seem to do anything at all. In this year's World Cup so far, he has accounted for a gape-worthy 12 of Argentina's 18 goals. He has scored 8 of them himself and has helped create 4 for others as assists. Without Messi, Argentina would be a windless flag. It's just incredible, his campaign, this tournament, how he carries that team. England's coach Thomas Tuchel told reporters the day before Messi broke British hearts in the semifinals with 2 of those assists. Tuchel added, "There are no words left for this kind of achievement." Observe Messi as he sidles into the middle of the field, blank-faced and unassuming, exuding quietude as he paces, disappearing in the action of men larger than him, sometimes even standing stock still. According to various estimates, Messi walks or stands for anywhere from 60 to 80% of a game. But by no means is he inactive. While the attention of his opponents slides off him, Messi is paying close attention to them. Notice how often his head is swiveling, surveying the field over each shoulder. "When I walk, I analyze the opponent's positioning," the normally closed-mouthed Messi told an Argentine podcast in 2024. Slowly but surely, he finds space and distance, edges away from the thickets of legs, his focus on getting out of the game, out of what's happening, he said, so that if his team recovers the ball, I'm well positioned, alone, or have some time to start a counterattack or another play. The value of Messi's unobtrusive searchlighting of the field is hard to overstate. It's why he remains such a factor at 39, leading the tournament in scoring over fleets of fresh-legged players in their teens and 20s who are supposed to be seizing his mantle. He'll encounter one of them on Sunday, Spain's 19-year-old Lamine Yamal. Messi is undeniably slower than he was as a teenage phenom nicknamed La Pulga, the Flea, who played with a creative spontaneity, so jumped up on soda pop and chocolate that he sometimes vomited during matches. Slowing down over time is not unusual. A 2022 longitudinal study of elite Spanish players showed that the total distance they covered in a game fell by an average of 0.56% a year as they aged, and that their high-intensity sprinting decreased by an average of 1.8% a year. But according to an essay this month by Gert-Jan Pepping and Thomas McGuckian, researchers who study movement science at Australian Catholic University, Messi's great strength has never been speed, but heightened awareness. He has a good sense of where openings are liable to appear, which lets him continue to riff past opponents and split the field. Pepping and McGuckian were co-authors of a 2018 study that used player sensors to track how certain visual exploration techniques, particularly frequent head turning and checks over both shoulders, lead to more effective passing and attacks on the goal. In an email, Pepping told me, "If you begin running slightly earlier than everyone else, you appear faster." In their recent essay, Pepping and McGuckian wrote that Messi wins by seeing sooner. They cite the legendary Dutch player and manager Johan Cruyff, who once asked rhetorically, "What is speed?" In soccer, speed is more than just a fast-twitch sprint reflex. It's an insight, Cruyff said. Messi's stalking, pacing, information gathering may well be the reason behind a striking team statistic. Argentina has now scored 11 goals after the 75th minute. Amid all of the hectic, ever-shifting action, Messi seems to find just the right cognitive judgments late in games, when a goal is most desperately needed. His insight was surely the chief factor at work in his most meaningful assist of the tournament, which clinched the 2-1 semifinal victory over England. With the score still tied at 1-1 in the 91st minute, he struck a curling cross that led his teammate Lautaro Martinez right to the mouth of the goal for a header. The play unfolded like somebody very slowly and patiently explaining a maths problem, per the delightful description of the Guardian's Barney Roney. As the ball rode the air, Roney wrote, everyone in the stadium became Messi, seeing the moment before it happened. Watching Messi at times can be an exercise in watching him watch. Doing so affords a glimpse of the game through the eyes of the greatest to ever play it.
A senator scans a crowd in a South Carolina gymnasium, looking for a shift in the wind, while a soccer player walks across the grass, turning his head to find a pocket of air. Both have spent decades learning how to be where the opening will appear. What lingers is how little of staying on top has to do with speed. It's mostly the quiet work of watching. If the secret to survival is always moving toward the gap, what happens to the person who decides to stand still?